Hello, and welcome to The Alt Left.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Alt Left. This is episode number...
Hold on. No. You shut up. It's my turn.
Okay, that's fair. Welcome, everyone, to Matt's Media Corner, hosted by Matt.
Hey. What's my full name?
I don't know. You're the host. You're the one who's got to dish out nicknames now, buddy.
Oh, that's not fair. I'm not good at this at all.
Yeah.
Welcome to Matt's Media Corner, everybody. I am your host, Matthew Jumbo Johnson. With me, as always, is the good Reverend Dr. K. Reverend.
Good evening, everyone.
I smell plagiarism.
And comrade, not quite as big as Matt, Chris.
No one is.
So welcome, everyone. So as we promised on our episode that dropped a few days ago, we are doing a dedicated mini episode to answering the questions you have all submitted to us. Now, some of these are things we would normally do in shout outs, like answers to just general political topics, but we also did a fun little thing on social media where we just told everyone, hey, you can ask us any 3 questions you want. 3 questions per host, anything you want, no topic too taboo.
Abraham Lincoln. Scott Fitzgerald.
Rigor mortis.
Now, nobody asked anything specifically to an individual here, so all 3 of us get to answer each question, which I think is going to be fun. But to start us off...
The best part of this, Kay and I are blind. Matt is obviously the one who always hosts and takes care of our media interaction, but Kay and I have absolutely no idea what's coming at us. We have not read these, and Matt's going to throw them to us raw so you can watch us squirm.
Exactly. And as well as great a job as Kay always does editing us, I think we're going to have a lot of these flops and stumbles left in here so you guys can enjoy the fun along with us. So what do you say, guys? You ready to start this off?
Now they can see how dumb we are when Kay doesn't edit us heavily.
Oh, yeah.
Because let me tell you, his editing is definitely the only reason why anybody thinks we're educated.
Yeah, about half of our listeners are just going to be like, these guys are fucking stupid.
Yeah, just an hour and a half of derp is what it usually is.
Yep. All right, you guys ready to start this off?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Jimbo.
So this is from Heather Michelle. She has commented once before. It was kind of a nice shout out we did earlier, and she commented again regarding Matt Gaetz, the episode we did on him.
Wait, talking about child predator and sex trafficker pedophile Matt Gaetz?
Yes, Republican pedophile Matt Gaetz. You know about him?
Just want to make sure we were talking about Republican pedophile Matt Gaetz.
Yes, Republican pedophile Matt Gaetz. We were talking about him. So she had an interesting addendum to that episode when we were talking about Republican pedophile Matt Gaetz. She notes that even if he were to try and get off the hook with, creating doubt with like the Epstein defense saying that he didn't know her age.
Talk about guys you want to be associated with, right?
Yeah, right. But even if he tries to use that bullshit defense, there's still something else they can get him on. She notes that he actually violated the Mann Act, which makes it a felony to engage in interstate or foreign commerce transport for the purpose of prostitution, debauchery, or any other immoral purpose.
Yep, and it's actually a double screw because there's evidence he might have used taxpayer funds for it too, I read.
Yeah, exactly. And so she goes on to note, and by the way, I just want a special note here. I really appreciate it when our listeners do this. Not only is she giving us additional information, but she's giving us a little history on it too. So for those of you that are curious, basically in 1910, this was America's way to stop sex trafficking of immigrants. And throughout the years, that's been amended. So the latest was in 1986, where they changed its verbiage to prostitution or other illegal sex acts, which sex with a minor is. That's the Mann Act. That's a brief little history from our listener, Heather Michelle. And that's more ways that we can go after sexual predator and pedophile Matt Gaetz.
I gotta tell you, I hate that. I don't get me wrong. I love that ammo is in the bag. There is no amount of tricks up our sleeves. I'm not pro for stuff like this and people like this. It makes me sad that that's kind of like, Al Capone has to go down for tax evasion, and again, we have to save Planned Parenthood because birth control also does other medical things besides just allow women to actually control their own fucking body autonomy. And it's like, here we go, Matt Gaetz. He's literally trafficking teenagers over state lines and selling them back and forth with his friends like cattle. And we've got to nail him on some fucking, amendment. And it just sucks. I hate that we can't nail bastards for being bastards.
I agree.
But I guess that's the argument about privilege, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing. If we can't nail him for the thing he actually did, which I agree 100% we should, I do like the idea of being other things that we can nail them for. But I think Chris is right. Oftentimes when we do that, the sentence that they received for nailing them on that charge is often much less than what they would have gotten if we just nailed them for what they did.
But yeah, this reeks of abuse, and it can always be abused. And that's why I don't like going after these evil guys with technicalities, because something that comes to mind is the case of Julian Assange. Julian Assange is a wanted man internationally because he pissed off the United States and Great Britain by releasing military details, publishing what a hacker found on WikiLeaks as actual journalism, which it was, to show that we were doing dirty, awful shit. That's why he's wanted. That's why they're trying to kill him and get him extradited. Or I think he has been, actually. Yeah, he has been extradited. And that's why he's going to spend the rest of his life either running or in prison. But that's not what he's getting nailed for. You know, they got him on some trumped-up charge of sexual abuse, which isn't real. It is very clearly a weak charge that has no basis in fact and was absolutely fabricated. Any credible news source will tell you that. And it has not been substantiated at all. And it's bullshit, because we know that if Interpol and the international justice community gave a crap about nailing sexual predators who fled overseas, Roman Polanski would be in a prison cell right now. But instead, we let him live comfortably in France. Not in France. I think he's in Switzerland, isn't he? Maybe he's in France. Actually, I think he is in France. I don't know.
It was they went to France and then they moved, I think, to like some other Polish place.
He almost got caught in France. Anyway, the point is,
Polish.
Roman Polanski's safely in Europe being defended by wealthy, powerful people because he apparently made good movies that people like for some fucking reason. Fuck Roman Polanski. The man's a son of a bitch. He's a rapist. So don't give me this crap about Assange, because that's not the real reason. The real reason is he made people in high positions of power look bad. And did it legally. Simply publishing leaks. And that's what this reminds me of. It's like, yeah, I'm glad we can nail Gatesy on something, but let's nail Matt Gaetz because he was literally buying teenagers as sex slaves.
Agreed.
Let's not nail him because he violated some minor act. You know, and they're going to find all these other little things. And it's like, I believe in a justice system that nails evil for being evil. And if we have to find some workaround, instead of spending our time finding a workaround, let's fix the system.
Agreed.
I agree. Yeah.
And that's a very long way of saying thank you, Heather Michelle, for your feedback. Thank you for reaching out to us. Thank you for engaging. And don't be apologizing, Chris, because I think that's great. This is the kind of stuff we like to do. This is how we engage with our audience. Never apologize for it.
Absolutely. But I don't want Heather to think that I'm nailing her, because I actually really like it when people can write us back with info that we didn't cover or we didn't think of or we didn't know about. It's fucking awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. This next one comes from another user, and he's got several questions rolled into one. The user is from Facebook. His name is Caden. I think he does listen to the podcast, and he's also pretty active in the Left You Were Warned About Facebook group. This is multi-parts, so bear with me, guys. Thoughts on the sudden wave of anti-trans legislation sweeping through Republican states? Also, what do you think about the situation in Myanmar? Do you think the U.S. has any right to step in diplomatically? Also, as I said in a post, do you think if you are under the age of 18 but paying taxes that you should be allowed to vote? So those are 3 questions he asked individually, or 4 questions actually. So let's take them one at a time. First one's first. What do we think about the wave of anti-trans legislation sweeping through Republican states? I think it's fucking awful and horrendous and bullshit. And I think Republicans are pieces of shit and transphobic and need to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, it end of story. It's just garbage. I guess none of it surprises me. Like, to find out that red states are putting through a bunch of anti-trans legislation to restrict healthcare from them, it's like, well, you know, duh. I mean, this is a hateful, ignorant, idiotic group who would rather spend more time talking about Jesus while they polish their tooth than actually think about the ethics of what they do. And this is a play to the base. Because, let's be fair, most legislators don't really give a damn about trans people, good or bad. They just don't really care. These are people who are, I mean, okay, if you're in Republican leadership, like, don't get me wrong, there are just colossal jackasses like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I don't necessarily think she believes in everything she says. I think she does believe in most of it, because I think she's just a hateful, awful, awful piece of garbage. But most lawmakers are intelligent men who want power. And they know that there's a whole bunch of hateful, ignorant morons who will give them that power if they forward their hateful, ignorant agenda.
Okay, any thoughts? Or are you just going to give us a thumbs
no,
up?
that pretty sums it up.
Yeah, figured as much. Not much to add after that.
Like, yeah, I mean, politicians don't give a shit about trans people. They are a small group of people that, I mean, obviously not insignificant, but they just don't care about them. And they do it for the sole purpose of furthering their own agenda.
All right, second part of the question. What do you guys think about the situation in Myanmar, and do you think the U.S. has any right to step in?
I'm assuming we're talking about the political coup that's been going on for a couple months, the military coup.
Yeah, I'm talking about the coup.
Okay. Yeah, if we're talking about the coup in Myanmar, yes, obviously that sucks. A military coup is never a good thing. It's especially bad for the people. So what? Why should the U.S. step in? I mean, are bad things happening? Sure. It's pretty rare that the U.S. steps in and anything good happens. The only thing that's going to happen from the U.S. stepping in would be a whole lot more bloodshed. I think we should publicly condemn it, say it's bad. I don't know, kick them out of the UN if they're even in it. Who cares? But that needs to be the end of it. When a country does something internally, that, again, if we're not talking about a mass genocide, we're not being like, oh, they forcibly sterilized 10,000. Like, okay, if there's obviously human atrocities going on, then yes, someone should step in. You know, like I hope someone steps in and invades America to stop our horrifying prison system and our legalized slavery system. But again, that's why I always put it in that terms of what is a tragedy to you is status quo to someone else. And so when we're talking about high death tolls, massive violation of human rights, and I mean real human rights, not like we can't vote anymore. Like, don't get me wrong, that's not good. It's not mass sterilization. It's not genital mutilation. It's not gas chambers. And I think that's the level it needs to be before military intervention steps in, not just because we think your government's doing bad things, because, well, that's pretty fucking bold of us to say, I think, as Americans. Okay?
I agree. The U.S. has no right to invade and send military to a country for any kind of power struggle they might have in their country, regardless of whether it's a military coup or whether it's just a change of head of state. If we want to sanction them and we want to stop doing business with them and things like that, sure.
Oof, hard pass.
I don't care.
Disagree.
Why is that?
I think sanctions are also an evil and terrible thing to do. Sanctions do not hurt the people in charge. Sanctions stop poor people from getting medicine and fuel and food. It has been shown time and time again, sanctions are completely ineffective, and all they do is cause the mass death of the poor. Like, we just sanctioned Russia, and the only people who are going to be hurt are the poor people in Russia.
Then I will concede to that point, but all I'm saying is that we don't have the right to send in our military every time something in the world happens that we don't fucking like.
Agree. But I mean, that's why I made the stink about sanctions, because I actually don't think we can really do anything except shake our finger at it. Because, again, first of all, who are we?
Agreed.
100 years, barely over 100 years from chattel slavery, decades from having a civil rights movement where people of every color are actually all considered human and still contain the most massive slave prison population in the world. I don't feel we have any high horse to look down on almost anyone. Like, I think we're at a higher moral standing than China and North Korea. That's literally the end of the list. We're probably the third worst nation in the world. So, in terms of how we treat people.
Yeah.
So, again, like, there's a military coup, and it's kind of like, and? Like, that sucks. Yeah. I feel for the people, and I hope things get better. And I'm fine with us making a stink at the UN, and if the international community wants to figure something out, okay. But whether we're going to go in militarily or via sanctions or financially or through trade, it just ends up hurting the people who have nothing to do with it. And so, no, let the culture work itself out.
Yeah. It just gives our leaders another excuse to keep boosting that military budget.
Boom.
Because there's no reason to do it. Like, I always think about situations like this is that, for those of you that have seen or haven't, I think about the movie Team America World Police. It's literally America going into another country, destroying the fuck out of it in the interest of preserving peace and freedom.
Oh, you mean like Iraq and Afghanistan?
Exactly.
Or Vietnam? Or Korea?
Exactly. Yep. Or we could keep going. And here's the thing. People laugh at that, but it was legitimately meant to be an indictment of our foreign policy. That scene in that movie is exactly what it is. And
I don't think anyone saw it any differently. It was.
Oh, I think there's tons of right wingers that saw that and was just like, "That's funny. We should do that more often."
I don't think any. And again, people feel free to disagree or write in or tell us stories if that's not true. But I have never heard a single issue of right winger being like, "Yeah, see, America's great." Like, I don't know of anyone who looked at that movie and saw anything other than blatant lambasting parody. Or not parody. What's the word I'm looking for? Criticism.
Yeah, fair enough. You give more right wingers credit than I do sometimes.
Fair enough. Mark my words, I think that's one of the reasons Biden has finally given a damn about pulling out of Afghanistan is because shit with Russia is about to go down.
Yeah, probably. But we digress. Last part, and I think this is interesting because honestly, I don't know where the two of you stand on this. And so I think we might possibly have some disagreement. I don't know. But the last part of his conversation is, do you think if you are under the age of 18 but paying taxes that you should be allowed to vote? And to expand on that, I saw his original post that stemmed this question. And he's like, basically wondering if people that are working and going to school and paying taxes, should they be allowed to vote if they're under 18? My personal opinion on this is no. I don't want people that are whatever signals of maturity that having a job and going to school shows. I still don't believe a person of that age is mature enough to be voting. And I don't really want, like, I know how mature I was at that age. At 16, I held a job and I went to school. I would still not want that version of me having a vote.
I did that at 13. Also agreed. I think voting is a result of citizenship, not of tax paying. I mean, people who come here from Denmark and spend a week at Disneyland have paid sales tax. Do they get to vote? They've paid taxes into our system. I mean, are we only talking about income tax? Because there's a whole bunch of wealthy people who don't pay income tax who vote. I don't believe taxation should qualify you for anything except paying taxes. It is citizenship afforded to adults. I mean, even in the cases where you could really say someone truly is responsible and being an independent adult is someone like an emancipated minor, for instance. Mm-hmm. But an emancipated minor is still a minor. There's a reason you can't make big life decisions before you're 18. Your prefrontal cortex needs to finish developing, or at least get most of the way. On top of that, if you're a minor, especially if you're not emancipated, which is a very rare circumstance, that means you're under the guardianship of someone else, and therefore that person can literally withhold anything from you and make you vote the way they want to. And I absolutely believe the worst people in society would do that.
So the way that I see this is, if we have anybody that earns an income, that has a job, that gets to vote, does that mean that actors that are 9, 10, 11 years old get to vote? Because where do we draw the line?
18.
But that's exactly my point. Do we draw the line at 16? Do we draw it at 15? How about 14? What about 13? Is a 10-year-old too young to vote? All right, so where do we draw the line? If it's at 16, well, then what's the point between 16 and 18? If the qualification is making money, then age doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We draw the line at 18 because that's where we draw the line for voting. That's where we draw the line for someone who is considered an adult. Yes, we have some sort of weird dichotomy between 18 and 21 as far as when you can sign up to go to war, own a gun, drink, smoke cigarettes or otherwise. But those are some kind of other weird things that have happened over the years. And I think 18 is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, if we're gonna start giving the vote to people at under 18, well, then does that mean they can be pressed into military service? Does that mean we're going to change consent laws? Because if you're going to give someone political power, how can you argue against the other things? If they're old enough to wield political power, how are they old enough to not wield consent? How are they old enough to not die in the military and be drafted? How are they not old enough to drink and do drugs or get tattoos or drive a car, own a house, like
any number of things?
Yeah,
anything and everything that has to do with age.
Yeah, you draw a line at where adulthood is, and at adulthood, you get the privileges of being an adult from then until you die, and
we consider that to be 18.
Yep, and I think that's about right.
And I don't know Caden's age. My assumption is that because he is asking this question, that he is probably somewhere around this age bracket. If not, I apologize.
Probably not, actually. It's a very libertarian,
probably not,
or classical liberal view that paying taxes is what determines citizenship levels.
Fair enough. But the only reason I want to mention it is this is not to say I don't believe that there are some people that are 16 years old that are not only mature enough, but completely capable of making an informed voting decision and exercising their right. I think that particular individual is a very small minority in what we're talking about. And I don't think enacting law based on such a small percentage of the population in this case is going to be worth it.
And even if it's not that tiny, I mean, let's just say 10% of people under 18, between the ages of 16 and 18 can have the mental acuity to do that. Whatever. You can wait 2 years. Like that is a small price to pay to not go to adult prison.
Exactly.
I think that line in the sand, if we're going to draw a line at adulthood, it needs to be for all things.
Yep.
Which is why I actually think the drinking age should be 18.
I agree.
I understand why it's 21, and there's actually a lot of good reasons for that, because alcohol and drug abuse does change the way your brain develops and slow things down when you abuse them younger. I think there's a decent health argument to make for that, which is why you shouldn't abuse drugs and alcohol at those ages. But it's not like changing the drinking age stops that from happening.
No, not at all.
I did a ton of underage drinking, So I think drawing that line of here's where adulthood sits and you get everything at once is a smart way to go. But it's a fair question.
Good questions, actually. All three of them. I thought they were great. Caden, thank you for reaching out, man. Thanks a lot. And to the last of the heavier questions that we've got, this is from a new listener. This is Marissa Frisora.
She sounds like a dinosaur, and that makes me happy. And so whatever she says, I agree with. I agree with our dinosaur listener.
She's been great. She's been doing I've seen her posting a lot in some of the groups. She's pretty cool. I like her. And so she says, "Hey guys, love the podcast. I started listening only a few weeks ago and I'm completely caught up now. And I just finished the Chauvin episode. And honestly, it was so painful. One of the few instances I felt myself agreeing with Kay that he would be convicted. But I do think it would only be because if they don't convict him, there will be hell to pay." So she's kind of agreeing with Kay and myself, I think, on that one.
A little bit, it sounds like.
The whole Chauvin case is one of the main reasons that I've joined Chris as the local card-carrying communist, and hearing all of your perspectives on it has really helped me process what is happening. Because of you guys, I chose not to be a bystander in the system anymore. It doesn't need to be revised. It needs to be dismantled. Just my thoughts. Thank you guys for all the work you do.
That is awesome. That is a huge compliment. Thank you very much. And keep up the good work, dinosaur friend.
It's definitely good to hear that we're actually making a difference.
Yeah. And I'll go on a side note here. We do rip on Kay a little bit here. I absolutely love him, and anybody that finds themselves agreeing with them, you're in good company. It may mean that you don't necessarily agree with myself or Chris. It doesn't mean you're in bad company at all. Kay is an amazing human being who's very smart, very intelligent, and comes from a place of logic, reason, and empathy whenever he makes a decision. Sometimes we disagree, but that's okay.
I would also go out on that limb and put my dollar on Kay's name. That if I had any doubts that Kay was an ethical, just, compassionate, intelligent, kind, educated human being, he wouldn't be in this podcast. Kay and I disagree on more than Matt and I disagree on, but that's because Kay and I are at the two polar opposites. That's why Matt agrees with Kay and me about equally. That's what this is. This is the spectrum of the left. And that's a good thing, because why would you want to only hang out with people who think the same way you do? That sounds boring as shit.
Very.
So no, Kay's fucking great. Agree with him all you want. I might call you liberal, make fun of you once in a while, but that's okay. I'm a pinko.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
All right. And thank you, Marissa. That was really, really heartfelt. And honestly, when we get stuff like that, it warms our hearts.
Warms our dinosaur loving hearts.
Marissa, I apologize, but you are now a dinosaur.
Why would you ever apologize? That's called an upgrade. I wish I was a dinosaur. That's the worst part of being an adult. No one asks you what your favorite dinosaur is anymore.
All right. We got
What's
a couple.
your favorite dinosaur?
Fucking Deinonychus, baby. That and maybe Triceratops. It's almost a tie. Triceratops are badass. Thank you.
All right. Very good.
Anyway, next question.
So the next question we got, this is from Stephanie Shredder, and she has actually 4 questions from us.
I love our listeners. Okay.
I do too. So Stephanie's first questions. Okay, this is the heaviest of where it gets. What will cause the eventual extinction of humans?
Humans.
Ourselves. Yeah, humans. We're going to do it.
Hands down.
Maybe.
We can't help. No. I'm sorry. We cannot help ourselves when it comes to destroying the the place in which we live by frivolous actions.
Allow me to clarify. That was not to say that I don't doubt humans will absolutely destroy
But
themselves
there's
with that.
tons of solar anomalies. That
Yeah, I was about to say,
before we kill ourselves.
we could have, gamma ray burst could happen at any moment. So we are actually at a high probability for a Carrington event at any time. There is high reason to believe those happen once a century. And if a Carrington event happened right now, we would lose every single satellite in orbit, every single cell phone tower, everything. We'd be done. A Carrington event smacking into our, even if it didn't affect things on the ground, taking out our communication satellite would cause such absolute chaos. And if it was big enough to disrupt things on the ground, which it did at the Carrington event, Google that one if you wanted to stay up way too late at night shitting yourself. It would literally just put us right back to the Stone Age. And it's one thing when all that happened was back then in the 1800s when telegraphs went out. Can you imagine if all electronics failed simultaneously around the globe? We're not just talking about, I can't play Castle Smashers on my phone anymore. Not only would communication stop, hospitals would be shut down. Planes would actually fall out of the goddamn sky.
They've made movies about this, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my point.
It gets even worse. No more episodes of the Alt Left podcast.
Oh, no. Stop. It's evening time. I have to sleep in a few hours.
I don't want to think about that.
I can't live in that kind of world. That's a one bullet solution right there.
Move on. Let's move on.
All right, moving on.
This is too dark. Too dark.
Let's lighten it up. Okay, next question from Stephanie Schroeder. Why does everyone like Seinfeld? My theory on this is that everyone liking Seinfeld, Friends, and various other shows of that nature is actually a Mandela effect. We are all having a mass delusion. Nobody liked it. We all just tuned in because there was nothing better on, and we've all reworked it in our minds to think it was really good.
I have never liked Seinfeld, ever.
Same.
Seinfeld is not funny.
Nope.
I never liked his comedy. I didn't like the writing of the show.
Nope.
I didn't like 90% of the characters on that entire show.
A+.
It was junk.
That review gets 5 stars. It was absolute trash. I have watched quite a bit of Seinfeld, unfortunately, because I've lived with people who loved it. There was one exception. There was an episode where they all had to stop masturbating.
The game
and it was
episode.
fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
It was very much like it, but that was them screwing up, and they accidentally made a diet version of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Seinfeld is a terrible show, and Seinfeld himself kind of sucks.
Yep.
People are like, no, Seinfeld's an asshole. Seinfeld's currently one of the many cancel culture crybabies who's like, it sucks, I can't drop the N-word anymore. People get mad at me. Fuck you off, billionaire. I don't care. They're all assholes. Julia Dreyfus is a delight, but that does not mean that
Absolutely.
Seinfeld didn't suck.
Yeah.
And Friends was also terrible. I don't really get it. I never understood it. I would say Friends was successful because it was fluff. We like fluff. The Keeping Up with the Kardashians and most reality TV is fluff. It's something to come home after work and turn off your fucking brain. And it was something that was safe. It was homogenous. Just a group of white people spitting puns. It's okay, guys. Everything's all right. Don't worry. Everything's okay. You can watch Friends. And I think Seinfeld was that, except for people on the East Coast who want to feel like they're smarter than Friends viewers.
Cool.
And that's how we lost half our audience.
Next one, super easy. I think all three of us should answer, but I'm going to take this first one. How many licks does it take to get the center of a Tootsie Pop?
8.
Yeah, we'll already answered that question. It's 3. Fuck you.
It is 1 to who 3.
Yep, exactly. Okay.
I think it's significantly more than that, but I could never do it. I always spit it.
I just want to know who's licking a lollipop. You suck on a Tootsie Roll Pop. You put it in your mouth, and it dissolves with delicious candy flavor until you get to that actual piece of poop that's known as a Tootsie Roll, and you spit it out and vomit all over the place because you actually had a Tootsie Roll in your mouth.
I love Tootsie Rolls. I think
I love Tootsie Rolls as well.
Nobody's perfect.
because whatever it is I think I see becomes a Tootsie Roll to me. And that
Tootsie Rolls
quote
are
right there
garbage.
just dated the fuck out of me.
They look like shit and they taste even worse.
You're wrong.
It's chocolate
okay
and
to be
shit.
wrong.
Got a Hershey's Kiss. That actually tastes good.
But there you go. And then the last one from Stephanie. By the way, Stephanie Schroeder, these are
She's just
fucking
shredding
good. Yeah, these are great questions. Oh, here we go.
You're so very punny.
Last question from Stephanie Schroeder. What powers protons and neutrons, and where does it come from?
The weak nuclear force.
And the strong nuclear force.
I meant to say the strong nuclear force. Why was I quoting fucking Gravity? My bad. Yeah, thank you, Kay. The
I
strong
don't know.
nuclear force. I don't know the weak nuclear force. The strong nuclear force. There you go. It's been a while since I was in a physics class. Yes, it is the strong nuclear force.
All right. Stephanie Schroeder, thank you. Fucking great questions. All right, next one. Alex, who is the best Decepticon and why is it Soundwave? I'm sorry, sir, you're wrong. Starscream exists. So, no.
Okay, hard pass. First of all, number one, I'm with Alex. Soundwave is the shit. He's a goddamn jukebox. Oh, not jukebox. He's a goddamn boombox. Like, if that doesn't scream the best thing that ever came out of the 80s besides massive cocaine use, I don't know what does. And Starscream? You mean the one who fucked everything up? The one who was too shitty to even be a Decepticon? Like, not only was he too garbage to be an Autobot, but he was too shitty to even be a Decepticon. Fuck Starscream.
No, hold on, real quick. Soundwave have his own, like, pet? That was the
it was a cassette. Yeah, Soundwave was the best. I'm with Alex. Soundwave was awesome. The only cool thing about Starscream was that he was a fighter jet, which I think is the only reason the Decepticons let him hang around, because he was just a badass fighter jet. And they were like, well, it's probably like Kanye West. He only has friends because he has a lot of money. Starscream's the Kanye West of the Decepticons.
Well, and here's the thing. The reason I say Starscream is because he was my favorite as a kid. I have no, like, argument to debate this. It's literally like, that was my favorite as a kid, so that's who my favorite is.
Nah, boombox. I'm with Alex. Alex, you're asking the real fucking questions, buddy.
All right. Very good.
Keep on fighting that good fight.
So from Alexis on Facebook, we've got a couple from her. First one, are you gamers? If so, favorite types of games and favorite gaming franchise? Great question. I'm going to say, I'll let you guys all answer individually. For me, absolutely 100% I'm a gamer. I'm actually trying to get into streaming a little bit in addition to this podcasting thing. I think my favorite are probably RPGs or first-person shooters or something along, maybe looter shooters in general is a better way to put it. My favorite gaming franchise, there's 3 big ones that I go to regularly. Skyrim, and that is because Chris here actually got me into it. I was very anti-Skyrim until Chris convinced me to give it a second shot, and I'm absolutely in love with it now. I go back to it regularly and replay characters and new stories every time. The next one is Diablo 3. That's another game. I cannot put my finger on it, but I always find myself being able to go back and play it and have a blast. And then the other one is the Infamous series. It's a PlayStation exclusive, but it is absolutely amazing. I don't know why it doesn't get more credit. It should. The last one they made was during the release of the PS4, and they haven't come back to it since. This is a game that is just rife with lore and amazing gameplay. It deserves its own movie, for crying out loud. Guys?
Well, I mean, first of all, it depends on gaming. If we're going to talk about video games, I'm kind of with you on the RPGs. Skyrim will always be my bae. Skyrim will always be top notch, A+, chef's kiss, best thing that it was ever made digitally. There's just nothing wrong with Skyrim. Everyone has the same experience. You log in, you make a character, you just wake up, you're in a cart, and then you join the Stormcloaks if you're good, and you the Imperials if you're bad, and then you kill Nazim. And then it's that's what everyone has. And Skyrim's amazing. One of I think the greatest game ever made. Secondly would have to be Mass Effect. So obviously I'm a big RPG fan. Love the Mass Effect series. I was boycotting it at first when the remaster was coming out, when they announced wasn't going to have the multiplayer, because I loved Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, even though I'm not the biggest multiplayer guy. But I'm still getting it because it's gorgeous and it's the best game ever made. But there are looter shooters like Gears of War. I absolutely loved. And Matt and Kay and I actually are all currently playing Outriders and Red Dead Redemption 2 online, because it's a hoot. The real love of my life, though, will always be tabletop role-playing games. But tabletop role-playing games are always going to be the love of my life. My favorite series will always be White Wolf. I love Vampire the Masquerade is probably my favorite of all time. After that, it would be other White Wolf things like Mage, Werewolf the Apocalypse, that kind of thing. And I'm a big D&D fan. I like Pathfinder, and I am loving D&D 5e. I am currently GMing one. So,
as far as for me, the only kind of gaming that I ever did was tabletop. Until about a year ago, never played video games. And that includes computer or console. I've never owned a console, never really had any interest. Was always into computers, but never really played video games. And then Chris got me into playing Star Trek Online. And while the pandemic has been going on, I started playing that. And then I bought a gaming laptop. Then I bought Cyberpunk 2077, which I've had a lot of fun playing. Then we started playing Red Dead, and now we're playing Outriders. And I'm really enjoying playing video games as an adult, but I never did it as a kid. It was never my thing. And then as far as RPG tabletop games, Vampire was the first thing that I was exposed to. Will continue to be probably my favorite RPG. But I've played Werewolf and Star Wars and homebrews and all kinds of stuff over the years, and that's always been a great source of fun for me personally. I've always played as a player and not as a DM, but that's not always for everybody. So,
yeah. And actually, one more note on mine. I never even thought about tabletop gaming until I met these guys. They're the ones that got me into it. So my experience is still pretty minimal, but so far my favorite system has been D&D 5.0, which is or is it 5e? Is that what we're playing? Is it 5.0 or 5e?
5e.
5e. There we go. That so far has been my favorite system. Although I will agree, I prefer the lore of the White Wolf games.
The world of Vampire and White Wolf is extremely fleshed out. And I think it's because it was probably one of the most popular games that people have played over the years, other than D&D in all of its different versions, and 5e being the most current. And I think we spoke about that before in one of our episodes and talked specifically about playing now online and using D&D Beyond. Website is a extremely good resource for all things that are D&D related.
Yeah. And I should clarify too. I agree about White Wolf's vampire series. I think Mage has interesting lore, and I'm sorry, but I think werewolves are fucking stupid in the way White Wolf handles them.
That's because you haven't played Wild West Werewolf.
Fair enough. All right.
That I agree with.
We will amend that, sir. I have the books.
Do you believe in the existence of aliens? Yes, I do. I think the Drake equation is, while it's not 100% purely data-driven science, I think logically speaking, it makes sense. And so the existence of aliens, I take to mean extraterrestrial life in any form, whether it's intelligent or not, I believe it exists.
Okay, so when it comes to aliens, do I think there is alien life in the universe? Highly likely. Do I think there are little green men at Area 51, or have we been visited? No, not a chance.
Yep.
The Fermi paradox tells us that we are an exception, and if there is life, it does not get much more evolved than us. Or we all end up in a Matrix simulation, because again, why not? I mean, have you seen the San Junipero episode of Black Mirror? That sounds fucking amazing. I would love to upload my consciousness. I would upload my consciousness in a minute. And those are the two ways I think it goes. Either the Fermi paradox, where there's the Great Barrier, which means now where the Great Barrier is, I don't know. I think there's actually multiple Great Barriers. I think the idea of cellular life evolving to any kind of complex structure is probably really rare. I think intelligence is even more rare. And I think intelligence surviving into the space era is ultra rare.
I agree with both Matt and Chris for the most part. Matt, there absolutely has to be the Drake equation. Depending on what numbers you plug in, depends on what kind of values you get. But I think it's far too likely just knowing the number of stars in our own galaxy. And then we think about the fact that there are that many more universe or galaxies out there in the universe. Yeah. I think it's extremely unlikely that we are that much of a one-off in the universe. Yes. And then we think about the Fermi paradox. What that basically means is that society or a group of intelligent beings gets to a point to where they destroy themselves and they can no longer go any further in terms of advancement, and as such destroy themselves before they're able to travel into the universe and make themselves known to other sentient life. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that the galaxy and as well as the universe is so vast that the technology that would be needed to move a sentient being across that vastness of space simply can't exist.
All right, so I think that covers everything for number one. I hope you enjoyed that, Alexis. Number 2 from her list, where do you think the country is headed politically? And do you ever think it will ever truly become progressive like the others?
No. No, I don't. I think The Handmaid's Tale is probably one of the best depictions of the future of this nation we have. And I think the only way that changes is if we fight it tooth and nail. And from what I'm seeing of the fighting, I'm not impressed. Trump getting out of office was the worst thing for progressive movements. The police are getting worse. Excuse me. We had Derek Chauvin get tried, and the other 2 cops are getting it tried as well. But I mean, that's well, we've had what now, three shootings in 24 hours of the verdict.
Something like
It's
that.
not changing anywhere. Chicago PD is just one of the worst in the nation. And they willingly shoot a child who's unarmed. Make awful tweets saying we are Derek Chauvin and just awful stuff. NYPD is the one who came out and said we can breathe, and it's just there's no major city where the police force isn't willfully corrupt in the killing of people of color. We also have no conservative senators. When John F. Kennedy ran for president, one of the biggest critiques of him was that he was Catholic, because he would take orders from the Pope and his religion would come over his duty to the country. But now that we have Biden, he proudly proclaims that he's a Christian first and an American second, and that is celebrated. When conservatives even had a big problem with Kennedy's Catholicism, now that's a celebrated thing to take your religion first. And again, I see conservatism is on the rise. It is deepening, and it is getting more religious and more severe and more backwards. And I see the opposition to that getting more milquetoast by the day. If Nancy Pelosi is the general in charge of the opposition, we're fucked. So no, I actually think things are going to get far worse before they get better. I see The Handmaid's Tale and V for Vendetta as far bigger predictors of our future than Star Trek at the moment.
I I wholeheartedly agree with 99% of what you just said, Chris. I think it will absolutely get worse before it gets better. I think that it won't get better in my useful lifetime because, unfortunately, even people just a few years older than us are still super conservative and still super racist. And while that is changing, it's not changing fast enough for us to see the spoils of that.
2 parts to your question. First one, I'm going to say, where do you think this country is headed politically? I think nowhere. I've discussed this before. In my view, it's an endless cycle of, do nothing Democrat, takes maybe a few steps left here on social issues, some more rights for, the LGBTQ community, but only if they want to go kill themselves for the country and things like that. And then as soon as they're out of power because they can't, they don't have the stones to hold anything, the Republicans will just erase everything that they've done and then some. There's this constant cycle of stay still, not really go anywhere, maybe lean a little left, and then get dragged further right. And then the next person that comes in kind of just plants themselves where they're at, the next Dem that is, and maybe leans a little left, and then they just get dragged to the right. And that's pretty much the cycle we've been on. So I think Chris's point is valid. I do see changes that give me hope. I see more people that are younger getting active. But one of my issues, and this is something I think I disagree with on Chris, it's not really related to your question, but I think younger people are more willing to show up to a rally or a protest than they are to show up at the polls. And there's reasons for that. I'm not going to deny there aren't, but I think you can't just show up at the rally and then not show up at the polls either. I'm sorry, but there's a voting component to this that's significant. And I get it. People feel disenfranchised, but until you get out there and do both parts of the job, not going to get done.
See, it's funny. That's actually one that you and I are the flip side on, because I would say it's great to go to the polls, but you need to show up at the fucking rallies. I think if voting actually fixed things, first of all, it wouldn't be legal. And secondly, we wouldn't have these problems. Our voting system is unfortunately rigged, and it needs massive, massive change. And I don't think that will come from the ballot box.
And again, I'm not saying one or the other is better. I'm saying you need both. And with the youth component, they do one and they don't do the other. That's my point. I'm not trying to disregard showing up at the thing, but again, I would even agree with your point. Like if you just show up at the polls and then don't get out and do the thing, again, you're not doing the job. You're not doing the work.
Yeah, but I mean, we can look it up. What's the percentage of eligible voters that vote? Is it something like 40 or 50% in America?
Roughly.
Well, it shifts everyone, but usually the best turnout we got this year was 63%.
Yeah, which is unheard of, and that's literally because everyone hated Trump.
Yep.
But typically, it's like a little over 50%, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're like the worst of any free nation.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's a valuable statistic, and I think that speaks volumes. And so I don't know. I guess my thing is, yes, I want people to vote. I vote, and I'll be the first to decry saying our voting is a sham and it is an absolute corrupt and bullshit system filled with gerrymandering and dirty money in politics, right? I mean, the Supreme Court absolutely murdered any last saving throws democracy had in this country with Citizens United.
Yep.
We decided that corporations get to buy politicians. I mean, so I don't know. And again, I vote, and I think voting is important because it's not just about my being mad. There's important things. There are county spending measures. There are bonds and things that go to helping my neighbors and people in need. Voting is not useless. However, a protest of not going to the vote to show that this system has no power in this country and that we as a society are growing disenfranchised with it, I think also speaks volumes. And I think it's fair. And I think it shows that, especially being that the old and the conservative are the ones who are voting, maybe it can be one of the many things that wakes up the liberals in this country.
I mean, it can, but again, if there's any hope, it's not going to be with the liberals. I don't honestly think the liberals are ever going to wake up. If there's
Probably.
any future to be had, like I think it's going to be with the youth.
Agreed. Voting in American system is a bourgeoisie action. That's the country we have now, and you are participating in it. And again, I'm not criticizing people who vote. I just think that the lack of voter turnout is not the problem. It is a symptom of the problem. And so that's why I don't attack people who don't vote.
Agreed.
But I think there's a lot of nuance in our opinions there, and that's okay to disagree on that point.
Just to be specific, approximately 60% of eligible voters vote.
Okay, more than I thought.
It's goes between around 55 to 62% of the last 4 or 5 elections. Yeah. So it's not a huge difference from what we were saying, but just to be correct.
But I would not go so far as to say that voting is not leftist or not voting is not leftist. And I'm not saying that's what you were saying, Matt. I'm just saying, like, for me, I don't take a hard stance on it. I think either choosing to not participate in it or choosing to both have validity.
Fair enough. Like I don't have any, like I don't have a problem with your take. I don't necessarily agree, but like I don't think it's like worth it. Like it's not the hill I'm willing to die on here.
Fair.
So
same.
And then let's see. Next question. So Alexis, hope that answered that question. Do you think the advancements in social media have caused more issues with relationships and or dating?
Yes, to be blunt about it. I recently was out of a long-term relationship, divorced, and then trying to get back into the dating scene was a fucking dumpster fire. Or, apps on your phone and actually trying to meet people is a fucking nightmare. And it's not just a nightmare for women, it's a nightmare for men too, because there's a lot of really shitty people out there that have no interest in anything other than themselves. But that is not to say that it can't be done and that you can't find worthwhile people out there.
My only questions to that answer are, but didn't you find your current partner on social media through an app?
I did. But what I'm talking about is that doing so is not necessarily easy.
No, not at all. But I think that's far more about dating when you're over the age of 20.
Well, and that may be, but we don't go to bars any longer and meet people. That is not the typical way most people find their partners.
True.
The majority of people find their partners online. They find people with similar ideas or similar interests through groups and things like that, and then they go and meet them, versus where we used to go out to bars and groups and do things and meet people first that way and then cultivate a relationship digitally afterward, whereas now it's almost the opposite of it.
Well, yeah, but I've met some awful, trashy, terrible people in bars. Like, I wouldn't say that the digitalness has made it worse. I mean, this is my opinion, obviously.
Well, no, and I would actually go with you on that. Now, but again, I have a bit of a biased view here. Now, I dated quite a lot the way you're talking about, Kay, and wasn't really the kind of way that I was going to meet someone. And you know, at a point in my life where I was kind of getting rid of bad influences in my life, and I was down to like maybe 2 or 3 good friends, you know, there was kind of this weird come to Jesus talk where they're like, you need to get out there and find someone because you have become a miserable human being. They're like, we get it. You're a nice person, but like you've kind of at a weird crossroads right now. And we think you need to find someone. And they recommended going on a dating app. And I did. And I agree with you. There was absolutely a big element of people that aren't really there to find someone special. They're just there to get their rocks off. And you got to wade through a heaping pile of that shit, especially if you're a girl, more so if you're a girl, I'd argue, before to actually find a kind of gold nugget there. But the girl I found on there is the girl that I married. We've been together for 13 years and been together for 14 years, married for 11. And when I really think about the process, really wasn't all that difficult. In fact, it was probably easier than some of the more in-person things that I've relationships I've cultivated.
I have found there's one type of person who is trash on dating sites, and there's a male and a female version of that person. And the male version takes shirtless pictures in the bathroom and holds digital fish up. And the female version talks about how much they love fitness and drinking whiskey.
Yeah, that's
and close. Throwing axes.
But have you noticed that like every single shitty woman's profile on a digital dating site is always, I love drinking whiskey. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. I don't believe you at all, Tabitha. You do not.
and if you do, Tabitha,
then great.
You don't put it on your dating profile.
Yeah, but it is just there to make guys go, oh, she likes whiskey. That's cool. It's like it's this false fake hanging with the boys thing. It's the same thing as the fuckboy takes his shirt off in the bathroom selfie. Like, all right, great. I'm glad you got abs, Chad. Who cares?
And Tabitha will always have a duck face picture, 100%,
yes.
Without a doubt. There will always be at least one duck face picture, and it'll usually be the profile picture.
And Chad will always have one of a baseball cap tilted at a jaunty angle that he's way too proud of.
Yep.
But that's the reason why I call it a dumpster fire. But that's also why I said it can be done, because I found my girlfriend on a dating app. I'm not saying that it's easy or fun or any of those things.
Well, here's the thing. The actual question she had was, does it cause more issues?
I think the question was, does it cause issues in the relationship? Like, I think she's talking about like Facebook and Reddit and all that existing in the digital age with relationships.
You know what? That's a good point. And I think in that case, I think the issues are always there. This has just brought them to a new forefront. You know, instead of a dude sneaking around calling women on the phone, the dude's now sneaking around on social media. You know what I mean? Or vice versa if it's a girl, you know. And so it's added a new element to problems that already existed.
I think people that are going to cheat are going to cheat. The way that they do that, whether it be with the honey at their office or with some girl that they met on Facebook or some girl that they met on some sort of dating site, as a side piece. Like, they're going to do it regardless of what you want or what the medium is.
Yeah, and I gotta say, if someone's going to be shitty, and again, I have been on all ends of that in an equation in relationships. We all have. We've had terrible relationships that fell apart. You know, sometimes you lash out, whatever. Sometimes the other person's doing something terrible, but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, if you're gonna submarine your relationship or if you're unhappy, you're unhappy. Having a cell phone, sure, it may take that into a different direction, because now maybe you'll be, talking to someone on Tinder rather than going to a bar. But that's it. Who cares? If you're going to be shitty, you're going to be shitty. And I gotta tell you, like, every time someone has been shitty to me in a relationship, it's never involved a phone.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does for people, and that's fine. Like, but there's no difference. If you're going to be shitty, you're going to be shitty. And guess what? Everyone is shitty to someone at some point.
Yep.
We're human beings. Forgive each other. Sometimes someone broke your heart and treated you like shit. You know what? At some point, you broke someone's heart and treated them like shit. It's part of the experience. Forgive and move on and recognize that we are all flawed human beings doing the best we can. And on top of that, I would also say something I have, again, this isn't something, Facebook, but Facebook is a toxic, awful place. But something like TikTok, for instance, places like Reddit, there's actually a lot of really good relationship advice. I can't tell you how many TikTokers who are like, hey, here's some red flags in abusive relationships you should watch out for. Here's what it's like when someone's treating you like shit. These are things that you shouldn't be hearing from a partner. Like, I feel like there's a whole community now of good advice rather than just your small circle of friends to ask. And I don't know. Again, I am always on the side that I think that there are problems, issues, and downfalls of social media and the internet. I always believe the good outweighs the bad, though.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right.
And actually, I find it funny that all three of us met all three of our partners currently online.
Yeah. So next question, again from Alexis. Do you watch anime? If so, what's your favorite one? I would
Fullmetal Alchemist. I will die on that hill.
Okay. All right.
So will I, honestly.
So I've never seen that. I'm not really, I'm not going to say I'm big into anime. The only real, I don't even know what's considered anime, but Dragon Ball Z, like everybody my age who grew, like went to high school in like the early 2000s did.
I'm not a huge anime fan. I got to tell you, I tried getting into Attack on Titan, and when it started, I was so pumped. I was like, oh my God, this is horrifying. These giant naked man babies. It was like Trump and Mr. Clean were huge and trying to kill me. It was terrifying. And then by the end of like the very first season, like the whole story gets flipped on its head, and all of a sudden it gets into just fucking weird nonsense. It went like last season of Lost, 0 to 60 immediately, and it lost me because it was this cool story about the normal guy. Everyone around him is extraordinary. His friends are all super special ninja people, but he's just a normal guy trying his best through tragedy to conquer evil. I'm like, this is a story I can get behind. Then all of a sudden he's like, I am the golden god, and I was like, all right, fuck you, you lost me. There's a lot of anime that I have tried to like. Not huge into it. Fullmetal Alchemist will always have my heart, though, Matt, and we're going to come watch it. That's going to happen now.
And here's my biggest
it's super
thing.
Emo. Warning.
I get that there's a huge fandom. Here's my problem with anime. The way these stories are typically told, it's from a perspective that the storytellers are assuming a lot about the readers and listeners. And I'm not saying there's a problem with it. It's just, it assumes knowledge that I don't have. Like I would have to, I think in many cases, you have to understand a lot about Japanese culture, Japanese lore, and things like that. Most of the time when I watch anime, I feel like I'm being dumped into a middle of the story without any context as to what's happened. And I'm just supposed to know a lot of the references they're making, and I don't. And so I don't care about the story or the characters. Now, again, that's not a problem. Like a good example of that on like the American side is the movie Bright. That is a great freaking movie. But if you don't know shit about Tolkien fantasy, you are going to be confused as fuck.
If you haven't watched Lord of the Rings, you're going to be lost. And here, I guess Game of Thrones is like that. Like, if you don't know Game of Thrones, if you haven't read the books or ever watched it before, you've got to watch the first half of the first season with a person who's watched it or read it, because they don't give you an explanation. And I think that's on purpose. You know, again, you pop a Star Wars movie in. Even if it's from the beginning, like pop in the very first prequel. If you haven't seen the original Star Wars movies, it's going to throw you off. And I think you're right. I think anime is a genre that relies on you being part of the genre. And I think you just got to jump into it. It's not my favorite. I don't watch anime. However, I think anime is amazing. I think it's talented. I think it's beautiful. And one thing I like about anime is it is the rule 42 of storytelling. There's an anime for everything. And you're like, I like baking chocolate chip cookies. There's an anime about baking chocolate chip cookies. I know there's an anime about ice figure dancers. There's an anime about everything. If you were a shoe cobbler, there is an anime about people who build and repair shoes. Guaranteed. It's out there. You know, there's an anime for everything. And I think that's actually really impressive, that there is a genre that has taken it upon itself to literally be for everyone in the world. I think that's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm not an anime person, but I got respect for anime.
Cool. All right. Last question from Alexis. Do you think people should be rushing to amusement parks like they are just because they open back up?
Fuck no, and I got a hot take on this one.
Nope, not at all.
The three of us are actually part of a Disneyland social club, and we are very passionate about Disney, the park, the movies, pretty much everything. And so we're into it. And so I'm going to let Chris speak for me on this one, because I guarantee you we agree 100%.
I think first of all, the pandemic's not over because you're tired of it. I think that a small opening up, now that vaccines are so common, like all three of us are double vaxxed, I now don't fear going to a restaurant, a small restaurant that is at minimum capacity. I think going out to places that are lessening capacity, that are smaller, is fine. Even mid-range places, but something like theme parks that hold tens of thousands, even at half capacity, 30% capacity, that is just too many people touching too many handrails in too close of a proximity. We need more time. And the only reason why this opening up is happening is because our governor is fearing his recall election. Disney is powerful. But no, I think it was criminal that they opened up Disney World so hardcore. I think they absolutely share part of it to blame for the surges in Florida. Again, if them just being open contributes to the death of one person or child, it wasn't worth it. Like, why? What, is Disney low on money? Are you kidding me? They own everything. They have money. They can stay closed for another 6 months until this shit is actually going. And unfortunately, greed won. And so, no, I can't wait to go back to Disneyland. I love Disneyland. This has not made me say I'll never go back, because to me, Disneyland is a part of my life, my childhood, and it will be part of my death. No amount of shitty decisions by an asshole running it is going to take that away from me. You will not catch me there until the summer's over. Like, there's still too many sick people, and I'm not going to put other people at risk because I miss going on Star Tours. I'll wait.
100% agree. Kay, any dissension in there?
No dissension. I agree completely. I'd just like to add that I don't care how safe or how careful or how much disinfectant they spray. I don't care how militant they are about making sure that everyone has their mask on. It's not safe. Just because I'm vaccinated doesn't mean everyone is, and doesn't mean that I can't continue to spread it if I take it with me from being in a mass place. And everybody has this idea that just because a bunch of us are vaccinated now, that all of a sudden the pandemic is over and we can go back to business as usual. And it's premature.
That's it for Alexis's questions. Alexis, thank you very much. I'm still going to say our friend Stephanie Schroeder has had the best questions, but everyone's been giving us great ones so far. We've got 3 more left. This is from Marcus, another friend and comrade from the Left You Were Warned About Facebook group. His is pretty simple and straightforward. How do you cope with outrage overload? We started a podcast. At least that's pretty much how I'm coping.
I punched a Nazi.
Oh yeah, a couple of them, huh?
No, just one. I've actually only gotten to punch one Nazi still, and it makes me terribly sad. At the rally in Huntington Beach, there was only a couple. A big disappointment of mine was actually something that I wanted to talk about at some point. There was only a handful of, and I mean, these guys, we're talking about people wearing, German Eagle shirts, SS tattoos, like not people who voted for Trump, actual Nazis. And several of us actually went to go after these guys. We couldn't get to them because they were surrounded by wannabe bullshit online journalists, basically some asshole with an iPhone and a vest that says press, several legitimate journalists, and hundreds of bullshit wannabe online journalists who were giving these guys a platform, crowding around them, listening to them speak, and literally we were getting shoved away. We were trying to wade through 100 people to get to these guys. And so instead of them getting taught the lesson they needed, they were given a platform and protected by the liberal media.
Yep.
So, but that's what I do. I bring soup for my family and punch Nazis. And I yell on the internet a lot, and I do a podcast with my buddies.
Yeah.
To be honest, at this point, the podcast is the main outlet. My girlfriend has friends that just rail against all things in all genres to anyone that will listen to them, and they end up alienating a lot of people oftentimes. And so to find a constructive outlet, or just any kind of constructive outlet, whether that's start a podcast, start a blog, go to rallies, go to protests, punch Nazis, whatever you got to do that's not detrimental to yourself or the people that you care about around you.
Yeah, very good. So short and succinct, but I think that's exactly what we were going for here. Gary Witzel comments on us a lot. We've given him a couple of shout outs, but he wanted to mention Florida's Senate passing HB1, the anti-rioting bill, and what it means for protests in Florida, and specifically how it targets the BLM movement. Thank you for all the shout outs. And as always, thank you for the great content. I mean, actually, this is very relevant to what we were talking about last week. I think it's disgusting. And they're not the only ones doing it, by the way. There are states all over this country that are enacting this kind of legislation that essentially makes it okay for people in cars to run over protesters in the streets, regardless of whether they're peaceful. They just have to claim they were fearing for their lives and they get a pass. It's bullshit. It's disgusting. But this is what you get when you get Republicans.
It's going to be an interesting legal battle because Florida is an open carry state. And if someone is actually charging you with a car, you cannot deny that you're in fear for your life. So can you shoot them when they charge your protest line?
I would hope so. I'm sure Republicans will try to find a way around that.
I think we're going to find out.
I think that would be hella justified to kill someone who's trying to run over a protest line because
I agree.
I'm really sorry that people made you sad and late for work. You're now against people like MLK who did this.
Yeah.
This is protesting. This is the American way. And it's not even just uniquely American. My God, have you seen what France does in protest? We are nothing compared to the awesome shit they pull. No, it is an absolute ultra-conservative movement. And it's not thinly veiled. It is there to stop dissent against police violence. And that's a dangerous situation where not only are we letting cops kill people, we're now going to start locking people up who dare to say this is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Well, and it doesn't just protect people who run protesters over. It classifies people differently and allows police to essentially decide whether they want to classify the people on the street, protesters or rioters.
Now, Matt and Kay, is that the people you want deciding whether or not your First Amendment is justified?
Not a chance. Not even a little bit. And it changes that classification by number, which it's like 7 or 9 people or something stupid like that.
I thought it was as low as 3. Like, I think it's 3 people can be, like, if there's 3 people just protesting, I think they can still be run over because they're technically a riot now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that it's that low, but okay. I mean, I'm not going to argue with it.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Whatever the number is, it's ridiculous.
It doesn't matter.
Which is fine, but apparently that means I can go drive through a field of Trump supporters.
Well, and that was the thing that hit me weird too. It's like, I've seen Trumpers do this too. Like, it isn't just a tactic of the left. The right does this.
It's never going to be applied to them because we're going to be leaving it up to the police and the district attorneys as to whether or not this gets applied. And, well...
Yeah, and that's part of the problem.
And if anything, the person driving the car through a right-leaning crowd, I think, has more to fear because those people are known to open carry more so than leftists.
More often. Again, regardless, we have a constitutional right of assembly. For the state to then say just existing in a group is a riot and is unlawful is completely against it's a complete violation of the Constitution.
Well, it's bullshit.
And surprise, surprise, who supports this? Police unions and the GOP. Shocker, right?
They get to use it to their advantage.
Well, who cares less about the Constitution than police and the GOP? Anyone? Can you think of anyone?
No.
I can't. Those are the 2 groups who violate the Constitution at the highest rate.
Yeah. No shit.
We got 3 more left. Let's end these on a happy note. First one is just a comment from our good friend TD Gamer. That's right. Thesian Dominicus Gamer has a quote from you, Chris. He says, this is a quote from, I think, one of our episodes, like 2 episodes ago, from Chris. If the body is a temple, mine has been a Roman orgy. Best sentence I've heard today from the Alt Left Pod. So
Thank you, sir.
TD's giving you massive shout outs there in love. And the next one is from Windsor, friend of the podcast, Windsor from the Thanks I Hate It podcast.
Hey, they're great.
They are
Everyone
great.
Go listen to them.
Everyone should go listen to them. They are amazing and wonderful. And she has a question. She wants to know which we think is superior, Rugrats or Doug.
Rugrats, no contest.
And the answer is neither.
Kay is not into cartoons, but Kay is not a normal
I like
person.
Cartoons just fine. I think both of those cartoons from the early 90s are junk.
That unit does not have a soul.
Yeah, it does not. Just ignore that guy.
Now, to be fair, even though I will violently defend Rugrats as the superior cartoon, that doesn't mean I trash Doug. Quail Man forever.
Exactly. They both have a soft spot in my heart. Like those things came out right when I was in middle school. Yeah. Like I was at the age of that they were targeting, but I agree. Rugrats was the far superior one.
It's a Star Trek, Star Wars thing. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, they're different, very much so. Both are good, but I'm not going to fault anyone for picking one or the other, as long as you
Yeah.
agree they're both good.
100%. 100%.
But Rugrats, Doug is the story of a privileged white boy, whereas Rugrats is about class struggle. So,
Yep.
Rugrats all day.
Yep. Like that take. Love that take. All right. So to close this episode out, we've got a big one for you guys. So I called him out for it a couple
I
episodes
told you
ago.
to wait till after the podcast, buddy.
No, I'm going to hit you long and hard right now. Our good friend Justin Randalls, the admin of the Left You Reward About group, kind of teased him a little bit. I think it was a couple. It was 2 episodes ago about saying he was going to submit a rebuttal to Chris's and basically all of our stances on AOC. He didn't do it, but now he has. So I'm going to kind of give you guys the Cliff's Notes version of this, because he, to his credit, wrote us a 2-page response. And so what I did is I just submitted that to the guys so that they could read it beforehand, and we'll kind of address them. But the long and the short of it is that he kind of answers. Chris posed 3 questions that we have to ask. The 3 questions Chris posed were, where does AOC stand compared to everyone else? 2 is, what is the ethical way to deal with it? And then 3 is, what would I do if I was in AOC's shoes? And so our friend Justin went ahead and answered those.
So to go off of, since he took my 3, they were, by the way, they were supposed to be rhetorical, but I mean, let's go ahead. Let's do it non-rhetorically. So, like, okay, for instance, you think, where does AOC stand compared to everyone else? And you made the correct assessment that she's, with the exception of like Rashida Tlaib, she's the furthest left. And I would actually disagree. I think Ilhan Omar is also left of AOC. I think AOC gets 3rd place.
Yeah, I agree.
I like Rashida Tlaib. She's a badass. She's my number 2. My number 1 is Ilhan Omar.
Oh, see, I go reverse. Rashida Tlaib first, and then Ilhan Omar.
But again, this is Star Trek, Star Wars. This is dark chocolate, milk chocolate. Like, you can have a preference, but they're both good. He makes the point that just being super progressive doesn't make you not valid to criticism. And I agree with you. And I actually completely agree with you. This is actually what I think is her biggest failing, is being so silent on the kids in cages, because she pulled a liberal move, and you're 100% correct. I think it's an accurate gripe, because as soon as Biden came into office, all of a sudden it was kind of okay, and we're not going to talk about it anymore. And that's bullshit.
Yep.
And that's fair. Your second one, where you say, what's the ethical way to deal with it? And this is the one where I both agree and disagree with you. You basically said you didn't like the question, and that it's total bullshit, because you can't have a criticism for AOC and not have a solution. And that's not what I said. I simply challenged anyone who has a problem to come up with a better idea. That's not to say you cannot criticize without having a solution. No, I didn't mean to infer that. But again, if we're going to trash her on it, if you're going to trash her on not being vocal, fine. You don't need a solution for that. But if you're going to trash someone on it, like I'm going to trash Biden, right, for continuing the Trump era of locking kids in cages, well, then what's a more ethical way to deal with it? The more ethical way to deal with it would be to start building daycare and childcare centers that actually have complete, clean, and beautiful childcare facilities where they can actually start getting education, receive medical care, receive actual parenting from people, and start pushing them into the foster system. And until then, rent out some hotels, but do not force them to sit in cages. That's my ethical solution. If we have money to bomb Syria, we have money to rent out 17 Holiday Inns. End of story. So again, it's not hard to, and you don't have to like that solution. You might have your own. But I'm sorry, if we're going to criticize one of the furthest progressive voices on this one, we need to have some suggestions. That's part of good governance. So you don't have to have the perfect answer. But again, if we're going to go after someone like this, we need to bring something to the table, is what I think. And the biggest thing is especially her not taking a stance on vote on healthcare. Now, again, I agree with that complaint. I think it's a good one, and I think it's fair. But I guess I don't see AOC as far left. I see AOC as a progressive. She is not a leftist. AOC is not a socialist. And so I don't expect socialism from her. I expect progressive liberalism from her. And I'm sorry, she's delivered. AOC is a true liberal. She is a pussy hat wearing liberal. And that's okay. It's not for me. I'm a leftist. but she is not. And so I can't hold her to that standard, just like I can't hold anybody else. I can say all of them need to be leftist, and I'm going to lump her in then with all the Democrats, and that's fine. But for one Democrat to actually push for things more than anybody else, again, for me, they're going to get the least of my ire. Not that you shouldn't criticize AOC, you should. But she is not Pelosi, because Pelosi is a pro-choice Republican.
Yep. And that, I think, is the key
AOC
point
is
right
a liberal.
There. Yeah. And that's the key distinction. Like, I don't think any of us were disagreeing that she has made missteps. I'll have to go back and listen, but
or that she hasn't been a disappointment, because I've been disappointed in a lot of shit AOC has done.
But what the key point we take issue with is her slipping, or her not living up to what you want her to be, and immediately lumping her in with Pelosi. I think that was the key for me, where I disagreed with, at least. You can be right about AOC not following through on things she needs to follow through, and you can be right to criticize her, and she can still not be the same as Pelosi. Like, it's not like the moment she trips, automatically she's the worst person ever. And that's, I think, where I took issue, is a lot of people are doing that. It's this not standing up for the kids in cages anymore, valid. She's not fighting for Medicare for all, valid. Now she's Pelosi. No, she's not. Nothing she has done legislatively compares to Pelosi. And I don't think, and again, let me just go one step further. We named Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar as more progressive than her. I'm just going to break the news to y'all now. They're going to play the game a little bit too.
Yep, they are.
And when they do, it's not going to mean that they're now suddenly Pelosi. Part of working in Congress means working with others. Like, they're going to have to work with Republicans on things too. I'm not going to like it. I think they're going to compromise on stuff, and I'm going to bitch about it and complain about it. But I also expect it to happen. And I'm not going to immediately lump them in as like sellouts and losers just because they've done it.
We can strive to, and I want everyone to be Maxine Waters at the minimum.
Yes.
But that's unrealistic. And again, if we're going to sit here and say, well, that's bullshit, and we shouldn't just be okay with the middle ground, I agree. That's why I don't vote for Democrats. I didn't vote for Joe Biden. I voted for a socialist. Do your part and support the people who agree. But again, I'm not going to give them the same. I'm going to criticize AOC as well. And I think your criticisms of AOC are legit and they are accurate, and I share them. I am also disappointed that she has no problem with torturing and jailing Mexican children. And I have a problem that in the face of a global pandemic, she has not fought to give us all health care. These are my complaints against Joe Biden, too. I'm against every Democrat. But for kind of example of this, to call AOC Nancy Pelosi would be like saying, well, Joe Biden bombed Syria, didn't give us health care, and he fucked a bunch of shit up and did a bunch of American bullshit, and so therefore he's the same as Trump. And it's like, I don't like Joe, and boy, does it, I get a little bit of throw up in my mouth when I have to defend him, because Joe Biden is on my shit list.
Yeah.
But he's not a willful alt-right white supremacist fascist like Trump was. That doesn't mean he doesn't suck. So you can say AOC is a disappointment and a failure to the progressive movement, and on that, I will actually back you. You are correct. She is a total disappointment, just like Obama was. We hoped for something, it worked out for a little while, and then the system ate her. Maybe she'll recover, probably not. That's not how this tends to work. I'm just not going to lump her in with conservatives like Pelosi until she does Pelosi style shit.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I agree.
You may hear a little bit of like detachment in our voices when we talk about this. It's because we're not emotionally invested in our politicians. That's the thing. And this is not to say that you are, Justin. I'm just speaking in general, because there's just this rabid cult-like fandom, cults of personality that develop around these politicians. And I've said it online. I think I've said it here. These people are not football stars. They aren't sports stars. They aren't your favorite sports team. You aren't supposed to be holding these just diehard, like, emotional opinions about them.
You're supposed to be critical of them of all times.
To be honest, I don't think we should be that way about sports stars either. You know, those are not the people to be revered. Politicians are not people to be revered.
Except Paul Revere.
Well, sure.
That was Jesus, Chris, really?
They can't all be gold.
No, honestly, you're better than that. Chris, okay, go ahead.
But my point of that is that we need to be critical of everyone in the public eye, because these people have a lot of influence, and as such, they need to wield that power usefully. And when they don't wield that power usefully, we need to call them out on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that we get to just liken them to whoever we want, because they aren't doing exactly what we believe that they should.
Yeah. You can be a
Yeah.
disappointment and a failure and not be the devil.
Yep.
They have to play ball just like everyone else, because otherwise they will literally never get anything done.
We definitely
Sometimes
disagree a
they
little bit on
do.
that one.
Sometimes they do, man. I'm not saying in
I would
every
just argue
instance.
sometimes. So again, like let's use Medicare for All as an example. They wouldn't have won anything by forcing the vote. Like, we know this. This is a known quantity. But having them force the vote would have made everyone go on record as to where they stand. They would have forced Democrats and Republicans to go on record, and then they could have used that to go after the people that aren't doing what we elected them to do, and they didn't do that. That's the argument for M4A.
On top of it, someone like AOC who got elected, she got elected because people are disgusted with the system. And her constituents wanted massive progressive change. This would have been a perfect moment that she could have been like, hey, don't like whatever you want. I fought for it. We lost, but I didn't let you down. And she didn't. This was a failure on her part. She could have capitalized on it as well. It wasn't like she just played ball for her benefit. I think she didn't. I think she played ball to her detriment, because these conversations are now happening with progressives, and progressives are the only ones who like her.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree with you on that point.
After this all happened, her and the rest of the squad were touting how they passed this legislation that made it easier for the Green New Deal to be passed down the road. That was their big compromise. They felt like they got it. And here's the thing, that might be true, and that might be a great thing, but in the court of public opinion, nobody cared about that. Because nobody thinks the Green New Deal is going to happen. So making it easier for it to happen when nobody thinks it's going to, at the cost of being able to go on the attack over M4A, is a loss to the people's minds. And I get it. But it goes to my point. I don't think AOC did it for nothing. I think she was trying to play the game, and in her mind, she got something just as good. But I think everybody else largely disagrees. And I think that's a valid point.
Fair enough. And on the end of his email, he did ask 2 more questions. He said, my question is, Chris, number 1, can you tell us more about the SRA, the mission, how to join this movement? I am not a spokesman for the SRA. I can tell you it's the Socialist Rifle Association. It is small, it is tiny, it is grassroots. It is not like the NRA or anything big. It is disorganized, not funded, and scattered. It is actually very hard to get involved with anyone. I have been trying, and my communications with people at the local SRA are hit and miss. I've been on their Instagram, and it's hard to get a message back. And part of that might just be COVID, but the SRA is tiny. I would say Google it, and you'll find their Instagrams. Try to find their social medias and message them, be like, how do I get involved? But it's difficult, and I would love to see that grow, though, because the SRA is about grassroots movement of arming communities of color and teaching them gun safety and marksmanship. The things that the NRA was actually supposed to do. It is about teaching regular people how to defend themselves in their homes. And number 2, for the revolutionary, he has a really, I've actually heard this from friends and people. This is a really good question. For the revolutionists listening, how can we get more involved? How do we find when and where protests will be happening? What are organizations we could look for to get more connected to the heart of the movement? Basically, again, this is grassroots. It's word of mouth. Now, one of the best ways to start getting involved is find organizations that are active, like the BLM of your nearest city. They will have an Instagram page. They'll have a Facebook page. They will tell you when they're having meetings, and they will also say when they're going to protest. Now, you may be thinking you want to do something better than a peaceful BLM liberal protest, but man, is that a great way to find leftists and get connected to the community. Showing up at a protest, you will make friends. Get involved with them. First of all, download the app Signal on your phone. It is an encrypted two-way messaging system. It works like texting, but it is fully encrypted. It's end-to-end encryption, and it cannot be intercepted yet. Now, remember, I wouldn't do anything horribly illegal on it because, in the next 25 years, we will have quantum computing technology in the government, and everything that is encrypted right now will be de-encrypted. Something you sent that was encrypted 10 years ago, that will be read by the NSA in the next 2 decades. But with that app, you can communicate with other leftists, and it can't be intercepted at things like protests where the police have been intercepting people's text messages. So go to these things, meet people in meet space, in person, because that's where you're going to be trusted. Download that app Signal. It's free. Anybody can use it. And you'll have a pin on it, and you can text people and do things like meet up for protests. Find out when actions are going to be. You need to build a small grassroots meat space network of your own. I know when protests are coming because I have met and made friends with other leftists I communicate with, and we tell each other when we hear stuff through the grapevine. When I went to the Huntington Beach thing, because someone sent me the picture of the flyer the Klan put out and said, holy shit, this is happening. And I immediately texted my protest buddies like, holy shit, have you guys heard about this? And we were like, yeah, we're definitely going to show up to this. And then eventually BLM got word of it, and then a bigger protest evolved. But I mean, it's all grassroots. I would love to tell you that there's some Excel spreadsheet you can sign up for. You'll get regular emails from soup cans. It's disjointed. It's chaotic. Meet leftists and go to, even if it's not hardcore or super far, go to a liberal protest if you want. You will find people at the most liberal milquetoast protests. You will see leftists. You will see anarchists and communists. Meet them. Download Signal, message them, talk to them, get involved. That's the way to do it, is you just start making friends and you all start passing this around like old ladies at a knitting circle.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the questions, everyone. Thank you for the engagement. Please keep it up. As you guys can see, we're getting so overloaded. We just had to dedicate an entire episode to literally just answering your questions. I love all the ones that aren't political either. I like talking to you guys about what we're into, and keep that up as well, please.
Agreed. This was a lot of fun.
I agree. We will definitely do this more often. This will happen again.
As I think we've said already, we aren't going to be having a regular episode this week. This is going to be filling it, mostly because we've got a lot of familial things going on in the back end for us. We will be back next week with our regularly scheduled episode. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, kids, the revolution is you.